The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand palace courtyard as Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. He had been working as a palace guard for 3 years now, and every day felt like a test of his endurance. The heavy armor weighed down his shoulders, and his feet ached from standing at attention for hours. But today was different. Today, something was terribly wrong. Marcus clutched his stomach as another wave of pain shot through his body. He had been feeling unwell for weeks, but palace guards were expected to be strong and never show weakness. The other guards would mock him if they knew he was struggling. The captain of the guard, Sir Edmund, was especially harsh on anyone who showed signs of being unfit for duty. As he stood at his post near the main entrance, Marcus tried to focus on his duties. Nobles and servants walked past him, their fine clothes and hurried steps a constant reminder of the world he protected, but could never truly be part of. His family back in the village depended on his wages from this job. His mother was sick and his younger sister needed money for her education. He could not afford to lose this position. The pain in his stomach grew worse and Marcus felt dizzy. He gripped his spear tighter, using it to steady himself. The palace walls seemed to spin around him, and he could taste something metallic in his mouth. He knew he needed help, but who could he turn to? The other guards were busy with their own duties, and showing weakness could mean immediate dismissal. Prince Alexander, the youngest son of the king, was known throughout the palace for his kind nature. Unlike his older brothers who were often cold and distant, Alexander had a reputation for treating servants and guards with respect. But he was still royalty and Marcus was just a common guard. The social distance between them was like an ocean that could never be crossed. As the morning wore on, Marcus felt his strength leaving him. His vision began to blur and he could barely stand upright. The pain in his stomach was now unbearable, and he realized that something was seriously wrong with his health. He looked around desperately, hoping someone might notice his distress, but everyone seemed too busy with their own important tasks. The palace was bustling with activity as usual. Servants carried trays of food, nobles discussed important matters in hushed tones, and other guards maintained their positions with military precision. Marcus felt invisible in the midst of all this activity, just another face in the crowd of people who served the royal family. His thoughts turned to his family back home. What would happen to them if he lost his job? His mother's medicine was expensive, and his sister's dreams of becoming a teacher would be crushed if she could not continue her studies. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him even harder than his heavy armor. Marcus tried to call out to a passing servant, but his voice was weak and barely audible. The servant hurried past without even glancing in his direction. He felt completely alone in his moment of crisis, surrounded by hundreds of people but with no one to turn to for help. As he struggled to maintain his composure, Marcus wondered if this was how his story would end. Would he simply collapse at his post and be carried away in disgrace? Would anyone even care about the fate of one lowly palace guard? The thoughts filled him with despair as the pain continued to overwhelm his senses. Little did Marcus know that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined, and that help would come from the most unexpected source. Prince Alexander walked through the palace corridors with his usual calm demeanor, but his mind was troubled. At 18 years old, he had already seen enough of palace life to understand the harsh realities that existed beneath the golden exterior. While his brothers focused on politics and military strategy, Alexander had always been drawn to understanding the people who made the palace function. He had been returning from his morning ride when he noticed something unusual. One of the guards at the main entrance seemed to be struggling. While other guards stood straight and alert, this particular guard was swaying slightly and appeared to be in distress. Alexander slowed his pace and observed more carefully. The young prince had learned to notice details that others missed. His tutors had taught him that a good leader must be aware of everything happening around him, from the grandest political schemes to the smallest human struggles. As he watched the guard, Alexander could see that the man was clearly unwell but trying desperately to hide it. Alexander approached the guard slowly, not wanting to draw attention from other palace staff. He had seen too many times how quickly rumors could spread through the palace, and he knew that any interaction between royalty and common staff would be discussed endlessly. But something about the guard's obvious distress moved him to action. When he was close enough, Alexander could see that the guard was pale and sweating profusely. The man's hands were trembling as he gripped his spear, and his breathing seemed labored. It was clear that he was seriously ill, yet he continued to try to perform his duties. Alexander admired this dedication while also being concerned about the man's health. The prince remembered his own experiences with illness. When he was 12, he had fallen seriously ill with a fever that lasted for weeks. The royal physicians had attended to him constantly, giving him the best medicines and ensuring his comfort. But what happened to common guards when they became ill? Did they receive any care at all, or were they simply dismissed and replaced? Alexander had always been curious about the lives of the palace staff. He often wondered about their families, their hopes, their fears. His brothers thought these concerns were beneath a prince's attention, but Alexander believed that understanding his people was essential to being a good ruler someday. This guard's plight seemed like an opportunity to put his beliefs into practice. As he drew closer, the guard suddenly stumbled and nearly fell. Alexander could see the man's face was contorted with pain, and it was obvious that he was fighting to stay conscious. The prince realized that immediate action was needed, but he also knew that any help he provided would need to be given carefully to avoid embarrassing the guard or causing problems with the palace hierarchy. Alexander looked around to see if anyone else had noticed the guard's condition. The courtyard was busy with the usual morning activity, but everyone seemed focused on their own tasks. Sir Edmund, the captain of the guard, was nowhere to be seen. The other guards were maintaining their positions and appeared oblivious to their colleagues' distress. The prince made a quick decision. He could not stand by and watch a man suffer, regardless of social positions or palace protocol. His father had taught him that true nobility came from one's actions, not from one's birth, and this seemed like a moment to prove that lesson was true. Alexander approached the struggling guard with determination, knowing that his next actions would reveal something important about his character. He had been raised to believe that leadership meant taking responsibility for those under his protection, and this guard was clearly someone who needed protection right now. As he prepared to speak to the guard, Alexander wondered how his intervention would be received. Would the guard be grateful for his help, or would he be embarrassed by the attention? Would other palace staff approve of a prince's concern for a common soldier, or would they see it as inappropriate? These questions swirled through the young prince's mind as he took the final steps toward the suffering guard. Marcus felt the world spinning around him as another wave of intense pain struck his abdomen. His vision blurred, and he could barely make out the figures moving through the courtyard. The armor that had once made him feel proud and strong now felt like a crushing weight that threatened to drag him to the ground. He knew he was about to collapse, but his pride and fear of losing his job kept him fighting to stay upright. Through his hazy vision, Marcus noticed someone approaching him. As the figure came closer, his heart nearly stopped. It was Prince Alexander, walking directly toward his post with a concerned expression on his face. Marcus tried to straighten up and appear more alert, but his body refused to cooperate. The pain was too intense and his strength was completely depleted. The prince stopped directly in front of Marcus and spoke in a gentle voice. "Are you feeling unwell, guard?" Alexander asked, his tone free of the condescension that Marcus had expected from royalty. Instead, there was genuine concern in the young prince's voice, as if he was speaking to a friend rather than a subordinate. Marcus struggled to respond properly. He wanted to deny that anything was wrong, to maintain the facade that he was fit for duty, but the words would not come. Instead, he found himself nodding weakly, admitting his weakness to a member of the royal family. He expected immediate dismissal, perhaps even punishment for failing to maintain proper standards while on duty. Prince Alexander studied Marcus carefully, and the guard was surprised to see compassion rather than anger in the royal eyes. "How long have you been feeling this way?" the prince asked, stepping closer so that their conversation would not be overheard by others in the courtyard. The kindness in Alexander's voice broke down Marcus's defenses. "Several weeks, Your Highness," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "But I cannot afford to miss work. My family depends on my wages, and I fear that showing weakness will cost me my position." Alexander nodded with understanding, as if this explanation made perfect sense to him. Marcus was amazed that a prince could relate to such concerns. He had always imagined that royalty lived in a world completely separate from the struggles of common people, but Alexander seemed genuinely moved by his predicament. "What kind of pain are you experiencing?" Alexander asked, and Marcus realized that the prince was not asking out of mere curiosity, but seemed to be gathering information for a specific purpose. This was not the casual interest of someone passing time, but the focused attention of someone who intended to take action. Marcus described his symptoms as best he could, explaining the sharp pains in his stomach, the dizziness, the weakness, and the nausea that had been plaguing him for weeks. As he spoke, he watched Alexander's face carefully, trying to gauge the prince's reaction. Would he be disgusted by these details? Would he lose interest and walk away? Instead, Alexander listened intently to every word, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. He seemed to be taking Marcus's suffering seriously, treating it as a matter of real importance rather than a minor inconvenience. This level of attention from someone of such high rank was completely outside Marcus's previous experience. When Marcus finished describing his condition, Alexander was quiet for a moment, appearing to consider the situation carefully. The guard wondered what thoughts were going through the prince's mind. Was he trying to decide how to handle this disruption to palace routine? Was he calculating the cost of replacing an unfit guard? Then Alexander did something that shocked Marcus completely. The prince turned and called out to a passing servant, speaking in a clear, authoritative voice that carried across the courtyard. "Find Master Willem immediately and tell him to come to the main entrance. Tell him Prince Alexander requires his services for an urgent medical matter." Marcus stared at the prince in disbelief. Master Willem was the royal physician, the most skilled doctor in the kingdom. He attended only to members of the royal family and the highest nobles. The idea that such a prestigious medical expert would be called to examine a common palace guard was almost unthinkable. "Your Highness," Marcus stammered, "surely you do not mean to waste the royal physician's time on someone like me. I am just a guard, not worthy of such attention." Alexander looked at Marcus with an expression that was both firm and kind. "Every person who serves this palace faithfully is worthy of proper medical care," he said simply. "You have been suffering in silence while continuing to do your duty. That shows courage and dedication that deserve recognition, not neglect." Word spread quickly through the palace corridors that Prince Alexander had summoned the royal physician to attend to a common guard. Servants whispered to each other in amazement, and several nobles gathered at a distance to observe this unusual scene. Never before had anyone witnessed a member of the royal family showing such direct concern for a palace employee of such low rank. Master Willem arrived within minutes, carrying his leather medical bag and wearing an expression of curiosity, mixed with mild annoyance. He was accustomed to being called upon for royal emergencies, not for the ailments of common soldiers. However, when he saw Prince Alexander waiting with obvious determination, he quickly adjusted his attitude and approached the situation with professional seriousness. Alexander explained the guard's condition to Master Willem in clear, detailed terms, demonstrating that he had been paying careful attention to Marcus's description of his symptoms. The physician listened respectfully, though his eyebrows raised slightly when he realized the extent of the prince's involvement in this matter. Marcus stood frozen with embarrassment as the royal physician began his examination. He had never imagined that he would receive such prestigious medical attention, and he felt overwhelmed by the prince's unexpected kindness. Other guards had gathered at their posts to watch the proceedings, and Marcus could see a mixture of amazement and envy in their expressions. Master Willem's examination was thorough and professional. He checked Marcus's pulse, examined his eyes and skin color, and asked detailed questions about his pain, eating habits, and general health. As the examination progressed, the physician's expression grew more serious, and he exchanged meaningful glances with Prince Alexander. After completing his assessment, Master Willem spoke quietly with the prince, but their conversation was loud enough for Marcus to overhear. "This man has clear signs of a serious stomach ailment that requires immediate treatment," the physician explained. "Without proper care, his condition will likely worsen significantly. He needs rest, specific medicines, and a carefully controlled diet." Prince Alexander nodded gravely, and then asked the question that made everyone within earshot gasp with surprise. What would be the best place for him to receive this treatment, Master Willem? Should he remain here at the palace, or would he be better served elsewhere? The royal physician considered this question carefully before responding. "Under normal circumstances, I would recommend that he return to his family for recovery. But given the serious nature of his condition, I believe he would benefit from remaining close to medical supervision. Perhaps he could be given quarters in the palace servants' wing and receive daily treatment until he recovers fully. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized what was happening. Not only was he receiving medical care from the kingdom's finest physician, but Prince Alexander was arranging for him to continue receiving treatment while maintaining his connection to the palace. This level of care and consideration was far beyond anything he had dared to hope for. Alexander turned to address Marcus directly, his voice carrying the authority of royal command but also the warmth of genuine concern. "Guard Marcus," he said, having somehow learned the guard's name during their brief interaction. "You will be relieved of your regular duties immediately and provided with appropriate quarters for your recovery. Master Willem will oversee your treatment personally, and you will continue to receive your full wages during this time." The crowd of observers murmured in amazement at this announcement. Such generosity toward a common employee was unprecedented in palace history. Several nobles shook their heads in disapproval, clearly believing that the prince was setting a dangerous precedent by showing such consideration to someone of low social status. Marcus tried to speak, to express his gratitude and disbelief, but the words would not come. He felt overwhelmed by the prince's kindness and by the realization that his family's financial security was not threatened despite his illness. The relief was almost as healing as any medicine could be. Prince Alexander seemed to understand Marcus's emotional state and placed a reassuring hand on the guard's shoulder. "Your dedication to your duties while suffering in silence shows the kind of character that deserves recognition and support," he said. "No one who serves faithfully should have to choose between their health and their livelihood." Master Willem began giving specific instructions for Marcus's care, including details about his medication, diet, and rest requirements. Palace servants were quickly assigned to ensure that these instructions would be followed precisely. The efficiency with which these arrangements were made demonstrated the power of royal authority when used with clear purpose and good intentions. As Marcus was escorted to his new quarters, he looked back at Prince Alexander with deep gratitude. The young prince had not only saved his health, but had also shown a level of compassion that would be remembered throughout the palace for years to come. The news of Prince Alexander's extraordinary act of kindness spread far beyond the palace walls. Within days, the story had reached every corner of the kingdom, carried by merchants, traveling entertainers, and palace staff who shared the tale with their families and friends. People gathered in taverns and market squares to discuss this unprecedented display of royal compassion toward a common citizen. In the palace itself, reactions were mixed and intense. Many of the older nobles were deeply disturbed by what they saw as a dangerous precedent. They worried that showing such consideration to servants and guards would lead to unreasonable expectations and demands from the lower classes. Some even suggested that Alexander's actions were inappropriate for someone of royal blood. However, the common people throughout the kingdom responded with overwhelming enthusiasm and admiration. For the first time in generations, they felt that a member of the royal family truly understood and cared about their struggles. Stories began circulating about other acts of kindness that Prince Alexander had performed quietly over the years, acts that had previously gone unnoticed or unreported. Marcus spent his first week of recovery in amazed gratitude, receiving daily visits from Master Willem, and enjoying meals prepared according to the physician's specific dietary instructions. His quarters in the servants' wing were simple but comfortable, and he was treated with respect by the palace staff who had heard about the prince's personal involvement in his care. As Marcus's health began to improve under proper medical treatment, he found himself thinking deeply about Prince Alexander's motivations. Why had the prince chosen to help him when he could have simply ignored the situation? What kind of person risked criticism from nobles and potential complications with palace protocol to ensure that a single guard received proper medical care? During his second week of recovery, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Prince Alexander appeared at his door one evening, dressed simply and without the usual formal protocols that accompanied royal visits. He had come to check on Marcus's progress personally, and his genuine concern was evident in his questions and demeanor. Alexander asked detailed questions about Marcus's recovery, his family's well-being, and his thoughts about returning to guard duties. During their conversation, Marcus learned that the prince had been personally monitoring his treatment and had instructed Master Willem to provide regular updates on his condition. This level of personal attention from royalty was almost unbelievable to Marcus. As they talked, Marcus gathered the courage to ask the question that had been troubling him. "Your Highness, why did you choose to help me when doing so has caused criticism from some of the nobles? Surely you knew that your actions would be controversial." Prince Alexander smiled thoughtfully before responding. "I have been taught that true leadership means taking responsibility for the welfare of all people under your protection, regardless of their social status. You were suffering while faithfully performing your duties, and helping you was simply the right thing to do. The opinions of critics matter less than doing what is morally correct." Marcus was struck by the prince's mature wisdom and genuine conviction. He realized that Alexander's actions were not the result of a momentary impulse, but reflected deeply held beliefs about leadership, compassion, and social responsibility. This young prince was already demonstrating the qualities that would make him a remarkable ruler someday. The conversation continued for over an hour, during which Alexander asked Marcus about his family, his background, and his hopes for the future. The prince listened with genuine interest as Marcus described his mother's illness, his sister's educational ambitions, and his own dreams of perhaps advancing within the palace guard ranks someday. When Alexander finally prepared to leave, he made another surprising announcement. "When you have fully recovered and are ready to return to duty, I would like you to consider joining my personal guard detail. Your dedication and character during this difficult time have impressed me, and I believe you would serve with distinction in that role." Marcus was speechless. The personal guard detail for a prince was one of the most prestigious positions available to someone of his background. Such positions typically went to guards with many years of experience and strong political connections. The opportunity represented not just professional advancement, but also the financial security that would greatly benefit his family. After the prince left, Marcus lay awake thinking about how completely his life had changed. A few weeks ago, he had been a struggling guard facing potential dismissal due to illness. Now he was recovering under the care of the royal physician and had been offered a position that would transform his family's circumstances entirely. The story of Prince Alexander's kindness continued to spread throughout the kingdom, inspiring other acts of compassion and changing how people thought about the relationship between rulers and their subjects. Marcus had become an unwitting symbol of hope for common people everywhere, proof that their welfare mattered to at least one member of the royal family. 3 weeks after his collapse, Marcus had recovered completely under Master Willem's expert care. The sharp pains in his stomach had disappeared, his strength had returned, and his overall health was better than it had been in months. As he prepared to resume his duties, he reflected on how this experience had changed not just his physical condition, but his entire perspective on life and service. The day Marcus returned to active duty was marked by an unusual ceremony. Prince Alexander had requested that the entire palace guard be assembled in the main courtyard to witness Marcus's formal appointment to the prince's personal guard detail. This public recognition was another unprecedented gesture that demonstrated Alexander's commitment to honoring merit regardless of social background. Sir Edmund, the captain of the guard, read the official appointment with barely concealed amazement. He had served at the palace for 20 years and had never seen such rapid advancement for someone of Marcus's humble origins. However, he could not argue with the prince's decision, and he had to admit that Marcus had shown extraordinary dedication by continuing his duties while seriously ill. As Marcus received his new uniform and ceremonial weapons marking his elevated position, he noticed the mixed reactions from his fellow guards. Some looked at him with genuine admiration and happiness for his good fortune. Others seemed envious or skeptical, wondering if they too might receive such consideration, if they demonstrated similar dedication. During times of hardship, Prince Alexander addressed the assembled guards with words that would be remembered and repeated throughout the kingdom for years to come. Today we recognize that true value comes not from birth or connections, but from character and faithful service. Marcus demonstrated these qualities by maintaining his duties despite personal suffering, and his example should inspire all of us to similar dedication. The prince continued his speech by announcing new policies regarding the medical care and welfare of palace staff. He declared that any employee who became ill while serving faithfully would receive proper medical attention and would not face dismissal due to health problems beyond their control. This announcement was met with enthusiastic approval from the guards and servants present. After the ceremony, Marcus began his new duties with a sense of purpose and gratitude that transformed his approach to service. As a member of Prince Alexander's personal guard, he was responsible for the prince's safety during official functions, travel, and daily activities. This role brought him into close contact with the prince and allowed him to observe Alexander's character and leadership style firsthand. Marcus discovered that the prince's kindness toward him had not been an isolated incident, but reflected a consistent pattern of behavior. Alexander regularly visited sick servants, helped resolve disputes among staff members, and showed interest in the personal welfare of everyone who worked at the palace. These actions were often performed quietly, without seeking recognition or praise. During his first month in his new position, Marcus witnessed several other examples of the prince's unusual leadership style. When a kitchen servant was caught stealing food, instead of ordering punishment, Alexander investigated and discovered that the servant was trying to feed his hungry children. The prince arranged for additional food allowances for staff, with families, and established a program to ensure that no palace employees' children would go hungry. When an elderly groundskeeper became too frail to perform his duties effectively, rather than dismissing him, Prince Alexander created a new position as a mentor for younger gardeners, allowing the man to share his knowledge while continuing to earn wages. These actions demonstrated a style of leadership that prioritized human dignity and practical problem-solving over rigid adherence to rules. Marcus also observed how other nobles and court officials reacted to Prince Alexander's approach. Some were beginning to adopt similar attitudes toward their own servants and staff, inspired by the prince's example. Others remained critical, arguing that such consideration would weaken authority and create unreasonable expectations among the lower classes. As Marcus settled into his new role, he began to understand that he had become part of something larger than just a personal success story. Prince Alexander was quietly revolutionizing the relationship between rulers and subjects, demonstrating that effective leadership could be both compassionate and strong. Marcus felt honored to be associated with this transformation and determined to prove himself worthy of the trust that had been placed in him. The changes in Marcus's own circumstances had also transformed his family's situation. His increased wages allowed his mother to receive better medical care, and his sister was able to continue her education with dreams of becoming a teacher. The security and respect that came with his new position gave Marcus confidence that he could provide for his family's future, while serving a leader he genuinely admired and respected. Years passed, and the story of Prince Alexander's compassion toward Marcus became legendary throughout the kingdom. Bards sang songs about the prince who treated common guards with royal consideration, and parents told their children stories about the importance of kindness and fairness regardless of social differences. The tale spread to neighboring kingdoms, where it influenced other rulers to reconsider their relationships with their own subjects. Marcus proved himself worthy of the trust Prince Alexander had placed in him. His dedication, loyalty, and growing expertise in security matters made him one of the most valued members of the prince's personal staff. He saved the prince's life during an assassination attempt, demonstrating the same courage under pressure that he had shown while enduring illness without complaint. When Prince Alexander eventually became king, one of his first acts was to establish comprehensive healthcare and welfare programs for all palace employees and their families. The policies he implemented became a model for other kingdoms and represented a fundamental shift in how rulers could relate to their subjects. Marcus was appointed as the captain of the royal guard, becoming the first person of common birth to hold such a prestigious position. The impact of that single act of compassion continued to ripple outward through generations. Marcus's sister became a renowned teacher who established schools for children from poor families. His own children grew up with a deep understanding of the importance of service and compassion, eventually becoming leaders in their own communities and carrying forward the values they had learned from their father's experience. Master Willem, the royal physician who had treated Marcus, was so moved by Prince Alexander's example that he began training common people in basic medical care. He established clinics throughout the kingdom where skilled healers could provide treatment to those who previously had no access to proper medical attention. This network of healthcare providers saved countless lives and improved the well-being of entire communities. The nobles who had initially criticized Prince Alexander's actions gradually came to understand the wisdom of his approach. They discovered that treating subjects with respect and consideration actually strengthened rather than weakened their authority. Happy, healthy, and loyal subjects were more productive and less likely to rebel against their rulers. The kingdom prospered under this new philosophy of leadership. Marcus often reflected on how his life had been transformed by one moment of royal compassion. From a sick guard facing potential dismissal, he had become a trusted advisor to the king and a respected leader in his own right. But more importantly, he had witnessed and participated in a transformation that benefited thousands of people throughout the kingdom. The story became a teaching tool in schools and leadership academies, demonstrating how small acts of kindness could have enormous consequences. Students learned that true power came not from the ability to ignore suffering, but from the wisdom to recognize and address it effectively. The tale of Marcus and Prince Alexander showed that leadership was not about maintaining distance from subjects, but about understanding and responding to their needs. In his later years, Marcus often visited the palace courtyard where his life had changed so dramatically. He would stand near the spot where he had once struggled with pain and fear, remembering the moment when Prince Alexander had approached him with concern rather than indifference. The memory served as a constant reminder of the power of compassion and the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect. The legacy of that day extended far beyond Marcus's personal transformation. It established a new model of leadership that emphasized service, empathy, and the fundamental worth of every individual. The kingdom became known throughout the world for its progressive policies and the happiness of its people. Other rulers sent delegations to study and learn from the methods that had proven so successful. When Marcus finally retired after decades of faithful service, King Alexander honored him with a ceremony that celebrated not just his individual achievements, but the principles that their relationship had come to represent. The event was attended by people from all walks of life, from nobles and merchants to farmers and craftsmen, all united in their appreciation for a system of government that valued human dignity above social status. The story of a guard who needed help and the young prince whose surprising order changed everything became more than just a tale of individual kindness. It became proof that one person's decision to act with compassion could transform entire societies and create lasting positive change for generations. Marcus had sought only basic medical care, but he had received something far more valuable: the opportunity to participate in creating a better world for everyone.